Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to this video where I will be giving my predictions for the NFL wildcard round in the 2025-2026 season. As if you didn't know, I watch a lot of football. As I said, have made predictions throughout the entire season, but those predictions, as I said, were, private prediction stuff I never actually uploaded. Although I might upload on my Twitter account all of the predictions did on the NFL Playoff Predictor website, where as every week I wanted to go and predict all the games, so that's why I went and did. Might post those on Twitter, but for the playoffs, I wanted to go and actually go and make a video, giving my predictions for the games that we have for the NFL wildcard, and then once again I'll do it for the divisional round, the championship games, and then the Super Bowl, because why not? That's fun. Sorry if I seem a little tired. I said wanted to go and do this a little earlier and record this a little earlier, but I wanted to go and get some extra sleep before the first of these wildcard games happen, which is the first game that I'm going to go and get my predictions with. Well, that first game being Carolina Panthers versus Los Angeles Rams, and this game is the only game I don't really have much to say about in terms of who I think is going to win. I'm going to take the Los Angeles Rams here. They're the better team overall, even though the Wade team. The Panthers won the division with a losing record. I've not been super impressed with them, at least compared to all the other playoff teams. This entire year, and even though cool that the Panthers made the playoffs, I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna get very far in the playoffs. So, yeah. Okay, moving on to the next game that I'm going to be predicting. We have Philadelphia Eagles versus San Francisco 49ers. And I like the away team here. I think the San Francisco 49ers are the better team than the Philadelphia Eagles this year. And I'm going to take the San Francisco 49ers to beat the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. I've not been very impressed with the Eagles at all really this year. Their offense is god fucking awful. They have the worst offense of any of the teams that made it into the playoffs. Even worse than the Carolina Panthers, who, I think lose to the Rams. And they've had to get heavily carried by their defense being absolutely incredible. But in my opinion, I think, now that they're in the playoffs, they're going to get exposed for how bad their offense is by a team who, not only has a pretty good offense, but also has a very solid defense as well. As I said, maybe not very solid, maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration with all the injuries the Niners have had, but that offense is very, very good. And even though once again we did see what the Seahawks did to it against, last week in the game to decide who won the NFC West and the number one seed, I still think that once again the Niners are the better team than the Eagles. I think the Niners have probably made changes and adjustments since that game to try and not something like the Seattle game happened. Plus, they also might get Trent Williams and Ricky Pearsall back as well for this game, although that is not confirmed at the time of recording this, but I'm going to assume that they have at least one of them back for that game, which is part of why I think they win this game. So yeah, but I think Citizens for us get the upset of and win the game. And finally, for the NFC side of things, we have Chicago Bears versus Green Bay Packers, where I'm going to take the favorite in this game, which happens to actually be the road team, the Green Bay Packers. This is the game that I have debated the most on who I think is going to win. I think most of these games actually could go either way. I don't think, as I've Los Angeles Rams versus Carolina Panthers. For that game, if the Rams did not win that game, if they get upset by the Carolinas, I would absolutely just be in complete shock if that were to happen. Outside of that game, all these other games, I feel like even one of the other games that I'll mention, which one is even that game, which I still feel like is still a decent gap between the two teams. I still feel like, as I said, the other team I think is less likely to win can still win. Then once again, I just feel like this playoff picture is one of the most open in the NFL long time. I think either of the teams could win here, and once again, I think you can see this with as this game and how once again this is this is the game that once again I was the most unsure about and who I think is gonna win. And as I think it also says a lot the fact that the Packers, despite being 7 seeds, are favorites to beat the Chicago Bears, who are 2 seeds. That should tell you how crazy and wacky the NFL is this year. And I'm gonna go with the favorites here, as I mentioned, the Green Bay Packers to win this game. Um, as I said, Packers have not exactly impressed me a ton this year, but the Bears, as I said, even though what they've done is impressive, once again, it definitely feels like they're not like a real contender. It feels like, as I said, compared to some of these other teams in the NFC, like it feels like the Bears are, kind of just riding high and are just happy to have gotten this far and have been this successful in this season. And even though once again, I can see the Bears winning a playoff game, maybe even another playoff game, maybe they could eventually get the NFC Championship. I personally don't think the Bears are a real contender. I think they're probably, I think their limit is probably the NFC Championship game at most. And listen, that's in the best case scenario. And even though once again, I think the Bears, as I said, for a lot of the year, have been getting slept on once it gets playoff time, and playoff time is one of the teams brought their best, and it's the Green Bay Packers, a team who has owned the Chicago Bears the most of any team in the entire NFL throughout its entire existence. And even though in recent years the Bears have started to, kind of switch things around with them splitting with the Green Bay Packers in the last 2 years, both those games were very close, and one of them required an onside kick for the Chicago Bears to win, which was the one in Chicago this year. Which, to be fair, that was a big game for them winning that. That game almost essentially locked up the division, which it would officially locked it up after the Packers lost to the Ravens. As an on that Saturday night football game, but still, the fact the Bears needed an onside kick to beat a Green Bay Packers team who didn't have their starting quarterback, uh, for as I said, a majority of the game, like Jordan Love was out. I think as I said a little bit like into the second quarter of the game. So once again, he was out for almost 3 whole quarters. And the fact they still need an onside kick to win, and the fact that it was also a Green Bay Packers who doesn't have Micah Parsons, which this one as it will also not have Micah Parsons because he's out with the year with an ACL tear, which obviously that hurts. Even I do think Micah Parsons is kind of overrated. I'm gonna be honest, but even with that, still obviously losing him is not a good thing for the Green Bay Packers. And once again, Malik is a backup quarterback, who is in the higher echelon of backup quarterbacks. He still is a backup quarterback. Jordan Love having will still help this team out. And once again, I've got more confidence overall, winning the division. I still feel like the Packers. I feel like the Packers at their best are the better team overall. And considering once again how this rivalry has overall gone in history, and considering the Bears once again, or I feel like are kind of ahead of schedule in the first place. I think the Packers are going to beat the Bears. Although once again, I can see this game going either way. I can see all these games going either way, minus Carolina Panthers, Los Angeles Rams. Outside of that game, I could see any of these games going either way. So yeah. And next up, we got New England Patriots versus Los Angeles Chargers. As if you wonder what order I'm doing this in, I'm just gonna do from highest seed. Is it in the game? Is the order I'm doing. So we have New England Patriots, then Buffalo Bills versus Jacksonville Jaguars, then Pittsburgh Steelers is the order we're gonna be doing this in. The as it was, but that's just because that was a very cool, clean transition I had into that game because it's the earliest of and I feel like it's just cool transition into it. So yeah, all right. New England Patriots versus Los Angeles Chargers. As I said, I'm finally gonna go and take the home team to actually win one of these games. I'm gonna choose New England Patriots. New England Patriots, I think, are pretty overrated this year. I think a lot of people, as I said, hyped them up a lot as like the best team in the NFC. No team has been on the same level of them. Oh, they're so good. When literally the only team they've beaten with a winning record, and who also made the playoffs because we're talking about teams, but they've beaten 2 playoff teams. But one of those teams was Carolina Panthers, who doesn't have a winning record. It was an 8-9 record. The only team with a winning record that made the playoffs that they beat was the Buffalo Bills, which is a division rival, and those games are weird. That's literally the only thing they beat. Plus, the Bills ended up beating them again in the rematch in New England in an insane game where they came back from 21-0 down and ended up winning that game 35-31. So yeah, uh, yeah. But even though once again, I think the Patriots are a very untested, unproven team, and in my opinion, very overrated. I do think that as I said, they are the better team than the Los Angeles Chargers overall, even with them having the most Mickey Mouse, cupcake 14-3 season ever. It feels like I think they are the better team than the Chargers because the Chargers here. I think the Chargers, if a fully healthy Chargers team, in my opinion, might be the best team in the AFC. Like I think they really might be. But the Chargers, they said, got really unfortunate with the injury bust, mainly in the offensive line, having their offensive line just get absolutely shredded by injuries, and that's really hurt this team and its offense. This team and its offense, as absolute best, is really great, but as the Chargers once again multiple season-ending injuries on the offensive line has turned but was probably one of if not even the best offensive unit in the AFC into a below average offense here with a really good quarterback who is unfortunately held back by how bad his offensive line is. And once again, the injuries for the Chargers, as it don't help. They finished the season not strong by losing to the Houston Texans to get eliminated from the AFC West in the number 1 seed, and then losing to the Broncos that ended up solidifying them as the 7th seed. Because if they would have beaten the Broncos, they would have been the 6th seed against the Jaguars in the rematch of the 2022 AFC wildcard game, which was that same game where the Jaguars ended up having an insane comeback in the second half and beat the Chargers. So yeah, but they would have went against the Jaguars if they had won, and then the Bills would have gone against the New England Patriots for the third time this year. If, as I said, Jags, well not Jags, if the Chargers had won, no matter if the Bills beat the New York Jets in the final game of the season or not. But because the Chargers lost and the Bills won, Bills went up to being the 6th seed. Chargers got down to the 7th seed. And while you could definitely argue that going up against the Patriots in the first round might actually be better than going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. As I said, first of all, that's debatable, As I said, but both Patriots and Jaguars are very capable teams, and as I said, as I said, just Jaguars have overall, proven overall. I feel like more that they're not frauds. Like Patriots definitely feel like they could be frauds, while Jaguars don't feel like they're frauds. With them actually having more than one good win under their belt. As I said, and not only do they have more than one good win, but as I said, they also ended the season hotter than the Patriots. Patriots, well, they were in a 10-game losing streak that lost to the Bills. And as they lost to the Bills in Week 15. As it caused them to be only on a 3-game winning streak going, which is still decently hot. But you have the Jaguars who are on a whopping 8-game winning streak, and as I said, team with the biggest win streak, which we're gonna get to soon. And that's definitely they're crazy, but yeah. In my opinion, the New England Patriots though are probably the better team than, and they're hosting in home in the cold, which Justin Herbert, he can't play in the cold. I think he's over better in the warm. And yeah, I mean most quarterbacks are better in the warm, but compared to it's a bit more of a drop off because some other quarterbacks when it comes to playing in the cold. He's not horrible in the cold, but once again, to go up against a team who's very accustomed to the cold, playing at home, and I think is all the better team. I think the Patriots win this game versus the Los Angeles Chargers and at least get to go on to the division round. All right, next up we got Jacksonville Jaguars versus Buffalo Bills. And I'm gonna preface this with the fact that while I have my biases when it comes to which teams I like and which teams I don't like, this is the only matchup where I do have an extreme bias towards one team, which is the Buffalo Bills. I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. As if you've been on my Twitter, you would kind of tell. So yeah, but as a Buffalo Bills fan, which does mean that this matchup more than any of the other matchups, I'm going to have a bias towards because I think well, I'm thinking the Buffalo Bills, higher than I think most people do overall this year. Partly due to being a Buffalo Bills fan, and that's going to apply to my predictions for the wild card round because, in my opinion, the Buffalo Bills do win this game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. They get the slight upset versus the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. Although I do want to preface this, even though I think the Bills win, I do not think this is going to be a blowout for the Bills. I think this is going to be a very close game. I do not think the Bills are going to walk in and just destroy the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. This is, in my opinion, the hardest wild card matchup the Bills have ever had. Under Sean McDermott and Josh Allen, I would probably say. Sean McDermott is debatable because the 2017 Jaguars were as a very very good team as well. Under Josh Allen, I definitely think this is the hardest wild card matchup of the 2017 Jag, who, as Sean McDermott went up against, as uh, his first playoff team, ever for the Buffalo Bills, and his first season as the Buffalo Bills head coach. Uh, as that team was very good, I would personally say though that this is. Hmm, I think Toronto was probably a better team than the 25 Jacksonville Jaguars. I almost said 25 Jacksonville Jaguars. But once again, I think there's a very slight difference. Although there's definitely a difference in terms of how good the Bills teams are in this year. Because 2017's Bills team only barely ended up making the playoffs and required, as the Tyler Boyd miracle play that happened for the Bills to even make it into the playoffs over the Baltimore Ravens. And even though they put a pretty solid fight, all things considered, they still ended up losing that game. And this Buffalo Bills team is overall a lot better. This team finished 12-5. They have a much better offense than the 2017 team. And as I said, they have Josh Allen, which, as I said, if there's going to be any player that's going to allow the Bills to win in this game, it is most likely going to be Josh Allen as well as James Cook to a lesser extent are going to be the main guys who are going to probably determine if the Bills can win this. Because once again, those are the two best players on the Bills. And once again, those two players can play well and put up tons of points. The Bills will probably win this game. But once again, Jacksonville Jaguars defense is very good, and played these two teams very comparable in a lot of ways. This year, they have a lot of similarities in terms of like stats and stuff, and hell, looking even at these two teams all time, they're tied with each other in terms of their series tied in 10-10. It's 10-10 the series between the Buffalo Bills, in terms of every matchup they ever had. Although the Jacksonville Jaguars are 2-0 versus the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs, which includes that as a 1997 upset win versus them in the wild card round in Buffalo, and then the 2017 wild card round, as I mentioned. So the Buffalo have never beaten the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs, but once again, as a 2017 was a crazy, not 2017, 1997 was a crazy upset, and then 2017, as I said, there were, so yeah, but in my opinion, are the better team. Josh Allen is the man, and I'm going to trust him to go win this game, get the winning game. Finally, we have the final playoff matchup of the wild card weekend slate, and that is Pittsburgh Steelers versus Houston Texans. And even though the Pittsburgh Steelers are the home team, the Houston Texans are heavy favorites, and there's a reason for that. And that's the fact the Houston Texans defense is really, 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 really fucking good. It is the best defense in the league. It is historic in some ways so far throughout the 2025 season. And even though once again, Pittsburgh Steelers overall played well at the end of the season. They won 4 of their final 5 games. As they did end up having that bad loss to the Cleveland Browns, which put them in a winner take home game in Week 18. Even though they did win, I mean, it literally came down to a missed 44-yard field goal by Tyler. To be fair, I was winning and I said a chip shot, but I mean, still, they were a missed field goal away from the Ravens being here instead of the Houston Texans, which that game it feels a little more interesting. I still think this is more interesting in general due to the fact that the Steelers team is probably the Steelers team with the best chance since like 2017 to go and finally win a playoff game. At least as the ones that actually made the playoffs. The 2018 team was pretty good, but didn't end up making the playoffs. So yeah, but as this Pittsburgh Steelers seems like the best opportunity for the Steelers in a long time to finally win a playoff game in that playoff win drought. Plus, it's also on a Monday night, which Mike Tomlin is undefeated in. But even once again, it's been the best Steelers team in a while, and the one that feels like the best chance to win a playoff game for since 2016. And that, once again, stat about Mike Tomlin never losing on Monday night, which is when this game takes place. I'm still gonna go with the favorites here. I'm gonna go with the Houston to win this game and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh to go and advance on to the division round, where as I said, they will likely play the New England Patriots. I mean, as I said, things play out how they are, they're going to probably, and I would take them again to beat the Patriots and like the first AFC Championship game ever, if that's how the bracket ends up playing out. I said black, that made no freaking sense. So yeah. Anyways, that is it for my wild card weekend prediction for the NFL. If you watch this, I'm, you know, happy that you listen to me absolutely yap and yap and yap. And as I said, these are just my predictions. As I mentioned before, I think all of these games minus Carolina Panthers versus Los Angeles Rams could go either way. Even Pittsburgh Steelers and Texans, I still think the Steelers still have a realistic shot to win that game, even if I would still choose the Houston Texans. And one more thing I do want to state is when it comes to my predictions, if my predictions are going to be right, a whopping 5 lower seeds will end up winning. As I said, in wildcard weekend. The only higher seed that would win would be the New England Patriots beating the Los Angeles Chargers. If, once again, my predictions being right, it would only be that one singular higher seed team who would end up beating, as of the lower seed, which will tell you how even and split these games are. If I only end up choosing one of the higher seeds to actually end up winning their playoff game. That will end up being that way in real life. I don't know. We'll see. But these are my predictions. If you had to get a wise idea, subscribe to the channel, and goodbye.